Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balcerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Sentra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit sentra.io. Let's dive in. We have a great guest and former colleague of mine today. He's a security veteran with over 25 years of experience and currently the CEO of Nexasure. Please welcome Rick McElroy.
Ward, thanks for having me today.
Awesome. All right. So every episode, we bring in a security expert, talk about data security. So with that, Rick, your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge that organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
This is those questions with multiple answers, and none of them are incorrect. But I'm going to hang my answer on a certain area inside of cybersecurity, and then I'm going to talk a lot about why I fundamentally believe that. I'm going to say it's people. Now, I know you work for a technology manufacturer. There's tons of technology to help solve some of these issues. But what have I seen over, 25, 26, 27 years of OSEC? What do we continue to see in our consultants? A lack of education and awareness. People that simply are too busy to pay attention to the entire wonderful world of cybersecurity, data protection, all of these things. And that's from the top of the organization to the bottom. People are just busy and we're competing for mind share. So in my humble opinion, where have I made mistakes in programs that I built? I've leaned too heavily into tech and not enough into the people and the culture. And ultimately, when you start to think about a culture of right, for organizations who are moving, giant amounts of gasoline across the country, they really have invested heavily in this idea of safety. After all, they don't want anybody to die while shipping gas. Smart from my perspective, but they've had that culture for 50, 60, 70 years. And the entire organization and the people in there under their training when they get onboarded to how they operate every day. And generally, I would say we operate fairly safe. There are edge cases. And so when I think about cyber, what makes some programs more successful than others? It's that cultural people component. And I think the education and awareness to make that sticky over time.
I love that. And agree. I think that's overlooked by a lot. Myself being a technologist, I often try to assign a technology solution to a cyber problem. I think that's natural, right? Cybersecurity, there's technology behind the scenes. So of course, one's going to think, hey, I've got this problem, data security. There's going to be a technical solution. Just kind of reflecting back on my own career, one of the first organizations I worked for, it was just that. Cyber was relatively new, firewalls, passwords. We started introducing more technology, but it wasn't for, 6 to 12 months later, we're like, oh my goodness, we need security awareness training. And again, back then it was super basic. So I'm curious, Rick, in your experience, what have you seen in maybe some of the newer program stand-ups? Where does that culture piece come in? Where does that people piece come in? And how are orgs being successful?
Here's what we found interesting. Most of our conversations aren't with CISOs. Some of our conversations are with CIOs that don't have CISOs, that barely have a security program. But by and large, our conversations are at the highest level in the organization. Have everything from things they've heard about from their peers to bad experiences with security teams along the way, inhibiting, there's just a lot of baggage over the last 30 years in cyber, right? And so again, for us, like, how do we generally engage with our clients? We start at the highest levels possible. Now, why do we do that? Because we do believe that cultural piece. So really for us, we look heavily at that governance layer. Like, who is actually responsible in this org for risks? Who's identifying them? Who's deciding on what gets funded? This is massively important. But again, outside of large enterprises, the C level is still inadequately educated on that, right? So for the where have my programs over the last 30 years succeeded and failed? I can assure you, we bought the best tech and failed. we had some of the best teammates in security. I've had amazing team members, still failed. Well, when you start to actually think about the symptoms you see in security, so we largely operate on symptoms, not on root causes. Hey, we've got a piece of ransomware, the symptom of someone who clicked on a thing in the organization, right? When you start to really look at, well, what was the chain of events that happened here that led to the breach or led to the failure or the accidental release of data? It's a very fundamentally human-driven activity, and we know we make mistakes, right? And so I think this helps us when it comes to designing technology, i.e., it can't just solve the security problem. We've got to think about things like complexity, ease of use. How many times are we going to go to an end user and ask them to do their job differently? Like, these are all things that I think if you spend time up front and design, and yes, you still need firewalls, you still need antivirus, but you have to start to think about the constituents that you're actually deploying this into. And ultimately, what do I want as the leader of that program? Well, what I would like is for employees of the organization to understand what we're doing, to not work against us, embrace when needed, meaning I saw something funky, I wrote that to the security team. And when you can start to build this coalition of the willing inside of an organization, you start to identify champions. Well, now, our calls are different. When we get, jumped into a business leadership ideation discussion, they're talking about business risk and we're not even in the room. Oh, this is the point where security is going to live beyond you and risk management and those things. And so I think, again, if you're thinking about building something for a company for their entire future, however long that is, the program's got to count for the people component. And I feel like we lean a little too heavily into the technology and process side.
Man, I mean, I already shifted my thinking a little bit as you were talking, because I'll tell you, when you answered the question, people and culture, my mind wasn't even thinking the security people, right? The defenders. I was thinking about the business people, right? The folks that are generally clicking those emails, the folks that are bypassing security. But as you were talking, I was realizing, yeah, of course you were talking about them. But first and foremost, you were talking about the defenders, right? The champions, the leaders, the folks that are actually developing these things, which I missed it. I think there's plenty of folks out there that are missing it, right? They're saying, hey, my biggest problem for data security is the business user. Not reflecting and saying, oh, hey, I'm also a problem and I need to be aware of that.
Yeah. And when you really think about, like, what are the constraints placed on this thing we call cybersecurity? Money. Number one, if you ain't got no money, you're probably not going to be secure if you make zero investment. Time. This is the one we forget about, right? I said, I have 5 engineers on my security team, plus myself. Well, if we had a normal job and we worked 40 hours like everybody else, that time becomes very, very precious. And so how are we not thinking about this time impact? Hey guys, I got to get 5 new controls in and I got to do it right now. Go figure it out. Well, they already have 5 controls they're managing, good APIs that can interact. Oh, now we've got this one-off solution that solves this very, niche TTP problem. But now I've got to have someone manage that full time. And so look, a lot of this stuff led to why cloud first security became a thing. And the rise of the CrowdStrikes of the world. And heck, even at Carbon Black Cloud, 2 years before launch that was a non-starter in the market and wanted to push out operations to the cloud. Well, guess what? Due to having to deal with the time issues and adding admins or going back to my IT team to go, hey, can you manage this for me? Like, none of that actually works in reality. And so I think, again, as we're out there approaching clients, customers, prospects, the general public, we have to go like, look, that we're not the most important thing. The number one problem in the business right now is like, how are we going to be agile enough to meet the shifting regulatory environment? We've got tariffs that are changing all over the place. All of that stuff, they're trying to be competitive and be in business. I have to hold that at the top of like, well, do I like a job? Do I like these people in the company? I want to keep the company up and running if it's a good company. I think you start to think about the impacts to the IT team, to the security team alone of the way we've tooled, it's crazy, right? And so I do think, why do you hear organizations that are saying, "Hey, we need like automation first. It has to be able to take this telemetry, ingest into these other solutions. We want to see partnerships from Splunk, from Sentra, from other folks that are out there, and specific to detection. Look, we know what the previous history of data protection has looked like. Lots of it involved DLP. What happens when you fire up traditional DLP solutions that have been out there for 20 plus years? Immediately, I get a massive amount of false positives. I've got to add 2 admins just to manage it and manage the communication flows back to my team, who's like, yo, this is an MD5 hash. So these are the things that I think, folks like yourselves are working on these types of problems, but we have to fundamentally keep the defender in mind because it's a precious resource and there aren't enough of us.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you went to the traditional data security tools. Again, I'm thinking back some prior roles where I was building data protection programs, and I think the first that a lot of organizations go to in data security, protecting the perimeter, is data loss prevention solutions. And to what you just said, you fire those up, you turn them on. More often than not, you're inundated by alerts. And I'll tell you, most of the organizations I've worked for, I was blessed to be able to hire some bodies, some really smart people to kind of churn through those alerts. But the problem was I had really smart people doing really basic things, right? MD5 that actually looks like PII. Like, what the heck? What's going on? Crazy. So how are you guiding your clients to again, you said the biggest problem is people. So how are you guiding them to really use their people assets for important people things?
Yeah, this is a huge part of what we refer to as like business consultation. So it's just an interesting time with agentic and AI. While we are embedding security and compliance everywhere, we're getting into a lot of conversations about just transforming business operations or IT workflows, right? And a lot of that is because we've got a lot of experience on those projects, and we happen to be the only sort of external consultants that they're speaking with. And so it's really interesting. Like, there's certain verticals that are massively underwater on manual work. So when I think about how a SOC works today, pre-agentic, well, if you think about medical claims billing, yeah, their lives look an awful lot the same. They wake up, they get a bunch of things sent to them first thing in the morning. They've now got to route those to humans to work on each one of those claimings and billings issues. They can't attach that to revenue in the organization, right? And so these are things that happen with a successful business because they had a person managing the whole thing. So when we come in and describe what's possible in this new world that we're in, and we talk to the individual who happens to be in the middle of this, and we say, well, what were you hired to do? Like, what are the things that you think or your organization thinks you should be doing that you're not doing today? Because I can guarantee you there's work. There's not a lack of work. And then you hear things like, well, what I'm supposed to be doing is coaching and mentoring other adjusters that come in. They have education. And so now I'm doing it as part of the ticket flow, not necessarily holistically. We're not able to now go look at automation because I don't have time to pull back from my day job to actually look at, could we automate this and make everybody's lives easier? And so I think for us, we're in that business of possibility, but then possibility realized. And so I think as we're thinking about it, it's like, look, it's not a matter of you need to cut people necessarily. It's just like you need to sort of these new frameworks and new ways of thinking so that you can really maximize the value in your very smart people. Right. And if a very smart security engineer can, as an example, handle 5-10x the number of alerts that come in due to reliance on agentic and AI and some of the contextual goodness that comes with that, well, that helps them. They get to go to sleep at night. Like, they get to vacations finally. Like, why do I talk about people so much? No one's coming to save us but us. Right. So we've dug ourselves a bit of a hole. We've turned on the lights everywhere. We got telemetry flying from all kinds of stuff we used to not. Now we're just drowning in that a bit and we're getting a little burnt out. Cool. How can I keep these senior people around, keep them working, keep them motivated? And ultimately, Ward, the other problem we're seeing in the industry is people are quitting. Like we need to think about how CIOs' lives have changed over the last 20 years. Why have CISOs' lives not changed to that degree? I mean, most of the CIOs I know, they sleep at night, they go home. They're planning, 5 years down the road. We're not. We're planning at best a year down the road. So I think there's some lessons for some of our peers in technology.
Yeah, going to sleep is always a good one, right? When I'm talking to my friends that aren't in IT or cyber, you inevitably talk, "Oh man, I had a rough 40-hour week," whatever it ends up being, and I always joke, 40 hours. What are you working a part-time job? Right? Like, I can't remember the last time, being a defender, I worked a 40-hour week. With that, right? 40 hours is great. Getting sleep is awesome. But the attackers, right? The bad guys seemingly never sleep. And they've got all kinds of resources at their fingertips, whereas an organization defending has finite resources. So, again, in your experience working with clients, how are you guiding them to defend almost in a follow the sun type model, or leveraging AI, automation, whatever, so folks can sleep and have a nice work life balance?
Yeah, well, one, is a giant consideration for buy versus build. You're going to build a security team. Here's the reality of what that's going to look like. You're going to use a managed security provider. Here's what the reality, and they both have pros and cons, right? But I would generally, I think we're embracing managed services as much as possible for organizations. The main reason is continuity in their program. So forget who the leader of the program is. If you actually want security operations continuity, a partner is the right way to do that, right? Yeah, and so I think for us, having a realistic threat profile of the org. Got a firm that we work with. They do investment. That's all they do. They do gas and oil investment. Okay, great. They have almost no external presence. They barely vet anyone. I mean, they vet identity for investors. You have to do that for the SEC, right? But they don't have a lot of gear, and so we go in and we're talking, and the CEO is worried that it's Russia, it's China, it's like North Korea. And we look at his environment and say, look, your two largest risks for your business is someone's going to trick someone into wire transfer money out of this org, like period, point blank. You got a lot of money. That's what they're going to look to do. So they want to get to your actual banking systems. Secondarily, ransomware. And that's just a high risk for everybody, right? So then we go, okay, cool. Let's get really laser focused around the most likely threats, right? Okay, cool. Now we're going to anchor it in ransomware because after it is the most likely. He had some other controls in place. I'm sure he couldn't just wire transfer a giant amount of money. Okay, cool. Now let's break ransomware down for a second and look at this Venn diagram of what ransomware people do compared to all advanced actors on the planet. Well, you start to see some points to your point about defenders having to be 100% correct and the adversary only having to be right once. I operate that's a little bit of a false premise. I should have observability, something like lateral movement in my environment. I should be able to notice that this laptop that wasn't talking to this thing suddenly starts talking to the thing. I should be able to notice things like identity misuse and privilege escalations, right? So what I've created is a way defensively to get multiple at bats. And this might not resonate with international folks, right? But I think in the States, what do I want to do? I want the most number of at bats I can get during a basic, because I know I'm likely to hit a home run or at least put the bat on the ball if I get 4 or 5 of them, right? And we know in baseball, look, they only got to be 30% right most of the time, which is great. So I want multiple at bats for my team, and I want to expose data in a way that gives them that, right? So I probably can't prevent all of the things. However, I think we push our customers towards a fairly significant investment in good prevention. Hey, there's a bunch of stuff you shouldn't have to worry about. Why are you paying 5 vendors to manage spam? A lot of that stuff should just be dropped, or change your workload to use something like content repositories in Google and scan those, and no one ever gets an attachment into their inbox. And, there's all kinds of ways that you can start to, then you think about how the adversary works, right? The fact that they want to repeat code, that they want to rinse these network scans, they want to look for the vulnerabilities, mitigating controls that we can put around that. But let's make it the right ones. Let's make damn sure we pick the right vendors that can grow with this organization. Because the other thing that the CEOs are massively complaining about is switching costs. We'll have clients straight tell us, don't come back to me in 3 years and tell me I bought the wrong firewall. But they do not want a security team coming in every year going, hey, I know I told you S1 last year, but now it's crowd. You can't do that, right? And you have to be okay that some of those products have known issues, right? So again, where does our wisdom and guidance come in? We know people who put their hands on all of the products. We know the marketing teams. So I think we can start to cultivate this realistic view of what the product is. Good, bad, how many admins you're going to have, the realistic kind of TCO of it, all of those things. But that's what they don't want to see. They want, they're willing to spend on security. They want it to be executed as fast as humanly possible, with minimal interruptions. And the last one is a predictable cost. That's the thing that CIOs did years ago. And their CEO comes to them and says, I want this new mobile app. And they are able to push a button and look at their boss and go, here's the cost of the new infrastructure to do this. That they have the same expectation from us. Cool, we need to get there.
Yeah. As I was listening to everything you were saying, something that struck me, tying it back to what you said about people being a big challenge for data security, and I've dealt with this too. The switching of technologies, it can be majorly impactful on people, right? So you hire your security team. Generally speaking, you're going to hire experts in said tool or tools. Now, congratulations, due to reasons, you have to switch platforms, whether it's internal influence, an external influence, cost, what have you. And some people are A-okay. I know I was, right? Okay, cool, new tool, I get to learn, right? Kind of pump my muscles up to get that the new thing. And yet there's others that don't, right? They want to be that expert in that tool and do nothing else. So again, going back to yourself and your clients, so let's say a client has come to you and said, hey, Rick, we need to change our tooling due to X, Y, Z, or maybe you went to them and said that, hey, you've got a deficiency or this tool's end of life or whatever. How have you navigated the people conversation when it comes to that tooling topic?
Yeah, I think with tooling, it's interesting, right? Because I love the tools that I love and you love the tool, and we'll fight to the death about the tools that we love, right? So I think in some cases, switching costs comes a pretty high impact. So I'll give an example. I think my general thumb is, if you have a well-managed control, I actually don't care what the brand on that well-managed control is. It's a well-managed control. It might have some deficiencies. So we could be talking about a firewall. We could be talking about antivirus, but well-managed, I will take that over. We just put it in and it's untuned. So I think when we come in, a large part of what we look at is that entire stack, the processes around the stack, and then go, what are room for improvement immediately? What's sort of room medium? And that's going to include a lot of automation and things like that. And then long-term, is this the actual right set of tools for the org? And lots of conversations with the team. So we don't operate like, if you've watched Office Space and the Bobs, it's like, no, we actually want to spend time with the people to, to understand their jobs first. Because at the end of the day, some of my biggest lessons in security were making assumptions and decisions, because I had to do that rapidly for the best interests of security, but ignoring the data that was out there from people, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, look, you may come in as an assessor into an environment and go, dude, you guys don't have patches, stuff's old. And you fail to ignore that it's two people on the network engineering team that haven't slept in a month and a half, that have bled for all of these projects, that met their bosses like, I need to have this out in 30 days, and then they do it. And then here we come, go, your baby's ugly. That doesn't land well, right? It's just not a good operating model. So I think for us, there's this huge discovery period. And I don't want to say huge and like we spend months doing it. But that's continual. The discovery is continual. Look, we generally start with the IT team and the C-level, but we've got to get out to finance and figure out, well, how are they doing what they do? Because I can't secure it. In my humble opinion, if I don't understand the process, I can't secure it. And if I don't understand the people, and here's the laugh I'll make about this word, I think we've got 5 generations in the workforce now, right? If you work for a Walmart or a, Home Depot, you've got boomers all the way down to Gen Alphas that are starting to come in. They all like interact with technology differently. To your point, Ward, the first time that I switched to antivirus on a company and that little shield, the little stupid icon in the right-hand corner changed, the number of tickets we got based around an icon changing for antivirus, it was wild, right? Well, why? Here we come changing stuff all the time. Then you've got the younger generation. So millennials and below have been interacting much differently with compute than the rest of us. They, the newer generations, my nieces and nephews, have a tablet in their hand when they're like 3. And then here we come, we bring them into work and we tell them, okay, no, you're not allowed to work like that at all. You've got to log into a VPN. You got to use Factor. Now you got to use a jump box just to get in and do your job. Like, this is how security is built. And so you have this wave of people coming in going, but dude, all this other stuff secure, like my banking, and I push a button, right? So unfortunately, some of those, macro consumer technology things haven't helped us. But yeah, so again, when it comes to the people and that switching cost, it gets in a lot of people's way, right? Not only in their way, but like it's protecting their workflows, right? So I don't want to say it's getting in their way, but it's acting as a fail safe for human mistakes and or programmatic ones where we just ship data, right? Yeah. So imagine all of a sudden you start getting alerts in your email from a system you haven't heard of that's telling you violate a policy. Now you're worried about your job. Like, oh, is my boss going to come get me for a policy violation? So again, getting out of that technology just a little bit. It does solve a problem, but it introduces other problems to the people. You got to holistically look at that when you roll them out.
Yeah. There was a couple of things I wanted to dig into based on what you just said, but I think I'm going to go right at the point you made around the multiple generations, because you're not the first person I've heard that from. In fact, I was at a talk, almost a year ago, where someone, their talk was literally called Leading Through the Generations, and how each generation communicates differently, interacts with technology differently, et cetera, et cetera. So going back to your point about generations, how are you bringing that into your conversations with clients about, security awareness and security training? Like, are you taking that into account at all when it comes to getting through to these business users to actually influence and change how they do work?
I like the last part of what you said, influence and change, right? So I can put up a poster that doesn't necessarily get someone to change their behavior. What I'm actually interested in is a change in behavior to the positive. Even if that's one tiny thing that one user does that's more secure than it was yesterday. So maybe that's not writing a password down. Okay. Well, if that's 10,000 users in an org, okay, I'm moving the needle, right? So I think for me, when it comes to security and awareness training, you have to consider the historical context of how people were educated. Boomers certainly have been educated they read a lot. They like to read and ingest data. Gen Alpha, if it's not on a video and it's not 30 seconds to a minute, it's really hard. So it is a difficult challenge for the program managers to think about. It is not a one size fits all. And in fact, then you break it down by functions in the department, right? So let's say I've got a multi-generational accounting team. Their interactions with technology much different, which means the way that I train them and make them aware has changed. And so for me, what I prefer is experiential. So even when we do our tabletops with executives, my tabletop, it starts with a fake, tweet that says we have ransomed your data. And, I want them to feel that visceral reaction as much as possible. And then to go, okay, great. I'm glad that this was a test, but what are we going to do about it? And then the executives have all wonderful conversations around comms and those. So look, I think on the awareness and training side, it's got to be multimodality. You've got to hit all kinds of different things. And the risks of say the older generations that are aging out of the workforce, they're starting to get scammed when they go home. And so it's just like, hey, talk to them about their personal risks too. And they'll probably engage in that security conversation. And again, I don't expect everybody to be a super fan of the security team, but not to work against us. That's the fit I'm really, trying to hit culture-wise in an org.
Love that. Last question for you about people. And I bring this up because I heard this a few times last week in conversations out of Black Hat. I was out at the Black Hat conference, just having conversations. And we were saying this in joke, but I think some folks actually do feel this. And what we were saying is, why does it matter that I protect my personal data? With all the breaches, people already have it anyways, right? I think back even in my own career, there was a major a breach years ago that not only exposed my data, but also my spouse's, also family, just due to the sake of the breach. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? And when you hear that, how do you typically fire back at those individuals to try to get them to think differently?
I think for me, it becomes very personal, right? I don't like giving up. And so, yes, has privacy, become Swiss cheese and everybody's just passing? Yeah. But like, why are we going to give that fight up? And I think the disappointment that I have in the security industry, by and large, not the community. So I mean, the industry, it's two different things, is like in some cases sold privacy out. When you think about stuff like I used to do, endpoint detection, you're recording very intimate data off of an endpoint. Of course, privacy starts to become an issue. Hey, in the States, not a big deal, but if you try to deploy that same tech in Luxembourg, like, they have rules that say you got to get that approved so you can monitor an employee's behavior, because that's becomes a little nefarious, right? And so again, I think for me, we took major internet outages for a day to protest some of this stuff, right? Like Reddit did it, Google did it, Cloudflare. There was tons of people who were like, this is wrong. We're not going to support it. And somewhere along the way, we sort of lost that. Now I can't figure out if that's because heavier government involved, whatever. But I simply think of it like this. It's in a micro level, it's your security program. Of course, you're having incidents. You're going to see evidence of a failing security program every day, multiple times a day. Should I give up on that? Or does that give me the starting point today in the presence and the things that I need to work on? And as a former United States Marine, like we don't have that in us to go like, well, they didn't give me the right rifle. No one cares. I got a shovel. You know what I mean? We're into it. Like the tooling sometimes, I think waiting around for that perfect tooling is a good excuse to not move some positive change forward. And some of them are going to be tiny, right? But as long as the company and people in the company are willing to take that step in that direction, don't give up on them. Like, just don't, right? So I know that's a little, Rick ranty on privacy, but I don't think it's worth giving up on. Now we may be, on a different podcast, I tell we might be too far gone, but I don't think we should give up on it.
I love that. It's almost something I try to emulate as well. What is it? The mentality of 1% better every day. Love that, man. Absolutely love it.
Even 1%, dude, I'll take it. But I think it's the leaders. The other thing we don't do is we're constantly looking at the future and these threats that are out there, and we don't look back. I had a boss who was adamant about this. He's like, dude, look at all the work your team has done in 2 years, like every project. Like made me do it in his office. And I was like, well, I got 50 other things that aren't done. And he's like, just take a step back and reflect. And after I did, I was like, dude, I got to stop being the maniac. Like this company has given us millions of dollars. They've allowed us to, inject ourselves in the most business. Why am I still complaining that people aren't moving in the right direction? So I think it's us sometimes, and, to be aware of that.
Love it. Love it. Well, we talked a lot about people. I'd like to continue that vein and talk about you a little bit. I mean, you've had a very long and experienced career, over 25 years. Um, what got you into cyber, and certainly, like, what got you to where you are today, being the CEO of your company?
So when I was in high school, I got to work with this cool program that was sort of a prototype that now exists in all kinds of programs. But they had electronics on one side and robotics on the other, and we were able to work on projects with NASA. That culminated a few years later when I enlisted and went into the Marine Corps. While I was in boot camp, our experiment got shot up on the Discovery. So I got really lucky in high school and got to spend time at NASA with like engineers who had ponytails and t-shirts. And I was intrigued as to the way I looked at it when I was 13 was like, wow, if you're smart enough, they don't care if you're in a suit. And sure enough, that has proven to be absolutely true inside of the cybersecurity realm. Outside of one job, I haven't worn a suit, right? And so I know that's a weird start, but I had TRS 180s and all kinds of stuff. My mom was very frustrated. I took things apart. So a little bit of a wonky, sort of home life. I was like, I got to get out of here. I got to get some self-discipline before college. So I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at 17, ran off, did that. While I was getting deployed and those things, I met my mate, who is still my wife after 25 years. Amazing. And then I was going to get out of the Marine Corps. And then I go, what the heck is a machine gunner going to do in the real world? Like, there's no civilian equipped. I can assure you, the closest thing becoming a cop, right? So there was a lot of CHP recruitment, that type of stuff. And I was just like, I want to go back to using my brain. So my stepdad, who had gotten out of the Navy as a data security professional, or as not data security, as a data specialist, gave me like the best advice. And he said, look, I know you're looking at going back to school. You should really think about IT and networking. And then I was like, why? And he was like, we can't find enough networks. So this is, 1998, right? Cool. I get out, I find a local tech college here in San Diego. I start going to school, start working before I get out of school. And then I will say my first gig, I was lucky. So it was a Southern California based VAR. Subsequently, they went on to create another VAR that everybody's heard of, Trace 3. But this is like the first version of Trace 3, right? So here I come doing switches and router installs and some firewall stuff. And then I go, wait a second, these guys have tattoos. They're in kilts sometimes, like Mohawk. I'm like, what is so like, okay, awesome. And then I volunteered to do a lot of documentation for that team. So as part of that journey, here's what we figured out. My face is suited to topics. So I found myself in sort of this doing the readouts of reporting, starting to do testing. Company falls apart. Great. I got to find another gig. And I was able to take that Marine Corps background and now this offensive background that I had developed and bring that over to Booz Allen on a major project that the Marine Corps were doing. They were basically ripping out entire old infrastructure for the DoD, putting it in new. What did our team get to? We got to go do all the testing. So flew all over the country, got to kick the crap out of teams who weren't ready for us. And I started to figure out, well, this is all too easy. Like, we're going to win every time. And I assure you, if you're still in the red team game, it may take you a little longer, but you're going to win in the end. Right. And so I went like, I want to go do defense. Like, I want to hardcore build programs. And so I started doing that in San Diego. I've done that for 4 or 5 companies, pretty much greenfield security builds, 0 to, maturity in 3 to 5 years. And then, sort of at the end of my last CISO gig, I consider myself very lucky. I had a good friend who, Kristen, introduced me to the co-founders of Carbon Black Hat. And what an absolute honor it was to represent the technology, the people. And that was all over the globe. Then we got bought by VMware. Now I mean, everybody's a VMware customer. So now I get exposed to, all these massive shops around the globe and their challenges and their problems. And which fast forward to, VMware buying us, VMware being bought by Broadcom and ultimately having to kind of face going to become part of the Symantec team. I think everybody who knows me knows I have 25 years of things to say about Symantec. So we really thought, well, what are we going to do in this next sprint with our time, talent, and wisdom, right? And I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people, and it came back to what you guys are really good at: rapid program builds, actually achieving an acceptable level of risk in an organization. I mean, of course, we still represent some vendors and some brands out there. We help out sales team with, enablement training, voice of the CISO stuff. But really what we're interested in is like helping an organization who has no idea how to get there actually achieve a semblance of security that's reasonable, affordable, and lives for the entire life cycle of their company. And that has been absolutely amazing because, again, the VMware represented us talking to CIOs, not CISOs or the, defenders or SOC team. So it's a different conversation. Now we're off with a lot of CEOs. And that, frankly speaking, took us a while to figure out what are the things they want to talk about when they meet with us. But it's also given us I think a better perspective on the business challenges of funding. Where do we start with security? Oh, it's so many things. Like, where do we stop with security? And those are the things that I think good advisors, whether internal or external, can go, we're at a point in the program where it's now kind of maintenance. We want to make sure things are tuned, but the big risks are handled, or at least we've got good investment and good tooling. But like at the end of the day, what we really want to do is give everyone a positive experience with security. And that is extremely hard to do because sometimes we block stuff. But I think for our clients, if we can make their jobs easy, then I think we're doing what we need to for our clients.
Love it. Love it. And your background is absolutely amazing, Rick. Kind of the last question for you here on really, again, it relates to your backgrounds, but bringing it to current day. I'm sure you see it as much as I do on LinkedIn. A lot of folks are getting caught up in rifts, layoffs. On the other front, there's a lot of folks trying to break into cybersecurity. So do you have any words of wisdom or advice for those individuals?
Yeah, I do a lot of mentoring for college students coming out, and I'm pretty visible and around in San Diego, so I actually get this question a lot, and it was something about 9 months I had to go revisit with other leaders. I go, our advice isn't working anymore. We went and do you know security and firewalls? You're the security lead, to like now highly specialized disciplines like malware reversing and crypto and kind of all of the things, right? So I think the people who started about 25 years, our experiences are wildly unique. After all, it was, I don't want to say it was the birth of the industry, but we were real toddlers. We didn't have frameworks. We didn't have, like, all of that stuff didn't exist. We had to go make it up, right? So now I think about what is it like for a college student, a junior IT admin who's interested in security, who wants to go do that. Like, what's the best advice I can give them to go between the book learning and like an experience gap? Right? Because the company's like, I want 2 years of experience with some tools. And so I think two things. One, what I tell people is there are so many free trainings by vendors that are out there. Like, I don't care who the vendor is, someone's running that product if they're offering training. What is the difference between Palo Alto and Fortinet? I know as a college student what a firewall is, but I can't articulate those things. A lot of that education is freely available. Secondarily, I would say, on the how do I close the experience gap. This is my humble opinion based on a bunch of anecdotal evidence. I don't believe people are volunteering enough early in their careers. This is something I had to do. A lot of us had to do because we said, well, how do I get to work when someone expects 3 years of experience and I'm in school? Well, okay, maybe I'm a member church. Maybe for me, at places like Wounded Warriors, they have Wi-Fi networks. They have networks. They do not have, I can assure you, they do not have enough IT people. With the right conversations with the right people, you can find those areas where, like, oh, and maybe it is a Palo Alto 5. Maybe it's not the 500, right? But you deployed it for an organization. You went in there and did some troubleshooting on their antivirus. Well, as a employer, that's kind of what I want to hear from junior people is like, I have a home lab. I can't come up with another solve for X for that other than I think it's going to take some people volunteering and, getting out there in their networks and looking for those opportunities. There's a bunch of other paths I think people should explore. What was one of the other things that I thought was a great job early on? Being a sales engineer for a VAR. We had 50 products. I had to get certified in all the products. Like do a deployment of Citrix or do a deployment of NetApp. Like no way without going up on site and getting certified training. And so I think there are some ways because I was certainly junior. I had zero experience when they hired me. Like it was, I don't know what they were thinking, but good on them. But again, I was able to volunteer. Here's another thing that I did early on. I went and found like stupid contract jobs for a day. Oh, IBM needs to replace all of the RAM at JP Morgan Chase. So you got to go underneath their desks and do that all day. Great. But then for IBM on a contract. So I think there's some ways to do like day or two gigs, week-long gigs, month-long gigs that aren't necessarily the job that you want. But again, if you've already spent that time investing in your education, spend a little bit more investing in those. I mean, like not abstract technical skills, like actual technical skills that a team needs. What does a team need? I need maintainers. I need people who want to come in and admin this gear, but they've got experience to do that. Well, great. A memoir has all kinds of training to, and you're probably not going to get, E10K certified from Solaris on that, but there's a reasonable path, I think. Secondarily, there's all kinds of villages people can work to get experience and build those networks, whether it's at DEF CON, B-Side. I mean, they're in every city, right? But I just, what I hear from people when I ask them, well, where are you stuck? It's two things. Everyone's getting it with thousands of resumes. AI started with resumes and pattern match recognition is weird. But when I talk to the hiring folks, and then the last thing I'll say, Ward, because I know this is a long rant, is the actual skills that employers are looking for are changing. So are they expecting someone to have built a SOC before? No. But do they expect a new employee that's coming out of college to understand how to prompt and understands what agentic is, impact to their program, and maybe has suggestions? Yes, this is the type of people that they want from a junior perspective. And it's not, again, somebody who spent 10 years building SOCs.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. And I'm sure the audience thanks you for that insight as well. So, Rick, if folks want to find you or connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, at Rick Decrypts on all the things. So X, LinkedIn. You can hit me up, rick@nexasure.ai. Pretty visible. You're gonna see my partner Eric Cole. He's got a book coming out in October, so I'm gonna shamelessly plug it. Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. If you've ever seen the movie Breach, you know who Eric O'Neill is. He wrote Grey Day a couple of years ago. And so again, this represents our ability to go out and speak to everyone in the world on cyber and what's actually happening there. Because again, those people that sit at home go into jobs. And so if we can reach them at home, great. That's a positive impact to our earlier point, about 1% better today than it was yesterday.
Love it. Love it. Well, Rick, thank you so much for joining us today.
This was awesome.
Awesome. And big thank you to the audience. If you learned something today, you laughed, you want to know more, please reach out, please connect. Most importantly, please tell someone else about the podcast. Like to get more people following. Rick, again, man, thank you so much for this episode.
It was great. Happy to do it.
Awesome. Well, this has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Sentra. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit Sentra.io. Catch you next time.